So there has been many talks, many discussions of the DCEU. Is it as good as Marvel? What direction is the DCEU going in? What exactly are they doing? Is it working? Do they need to abandon the whole thing? What are some strategies they can use? What can they do? We're going to get into that. All right, so I have some special guests with me today. I have one of my good friends, been friends for, I want to say about, 20 something years. I think I was 18 when I met this man. It's going to be me, him, and his son, and we are going to discuss some things that we think is possibly wrong with the DCEU and which way they can go to fix this. Welcome, my guests. Welcome. Thank you for joining us here on the podcast. I wanted to give you some claps and a warm welcome. Thank you. We appreciate it. The fans will love this one. So this is how we're going to start out. The DCEU. Now, there's several things that I like about the director's cut of the Justice League. The one on HBO Max. I thought that was great, but I think that DCEU has fallen short of what they wanted to do, and I don't know exactly if they know what they wanted to do. So we'll start out with there, and you can give me your thoughts.
Okay. Goodness, how to start? I guess it really, the thing boils down to vision, and you have somebody with vision, and then you have somebody else with a different vision. And what Warner Brothers has had, and this may go take us back into history too, since it, and you just mentioned before that this isn't necessarily the DCEU. And because you mentioned the Batman's outside of the DCEU.
It is true.
So we may have to kind of go back and forth looking at that and seeing why. And so, unfortunately, Warner Brothers corporate, heads and all that, they're mixed minds. There's groups of people doing it, but their main ideas are either money or politics. You've got a woke agenda going on in entertainment that's just taking over and destroying everything. So it's not just
this is true.
You can see that in the CW shows and stuff like that, especially, and then the movies. The same thing goes over to Marvel. Marvel didn't have it going on before. Not exactly sure when Disney bought them.
2009. No.
2009?
I think it was 2009.
When Disney bought Marvel? Yeah, I don't know the exact dates. I'll have to look that up. I'll do that now.
And what movie was that? What time frame?
Just before the event. No.
I think, was it Iron Man? I think it was
Iron Man 2.
Before,
Iron Man 2.
Let's see.
No.
You think it was that long ago? You can look it up.
2008 was Iron Man and Hulk.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
It feels like Disney didn't buy them that early, but
yeah, I don't think they did. It might have been like right after.
Even if they did, I think that in the deal and in the contract was like, we have this all planned out till, here
December 31st, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but like I said, even then, you probably have in the contract, we've got these plans, we've got this schedule of movies coming out. This is the way we're going to do it. And Disney wasn't quite as bad as it is now, as like blatant. They're getting more and more, blatant as they go along every year.
This is true.
So that's kind of the two things that they deal with. They're like, we want to make money. All right. And on the other hand, you've got the vision. So DCU is supposed to start with a vision, for Man of Steel. Yeah, Man of Steel's
That was a
the
great movie, by the
kickoff
way.
part.
Yeah, that was
It's
great.
an awesome movie,
Yeah.
an awesome vision. He essentially got everything he wanted to do, in it. And so then it's moving along. I forgot to write down here Suicide Squad, where that is.
It's another good one.
Now, if you go by releases and movies and income and box office numbers and stuff like that, like Carson mentioned, there's the Incredible Hulk, which is a great movie, and Iron Man, which is a great movie as it is. It has, I could criticize, but I'll just leave it at it's pretty
Okay.
good movie.
I'd be curious to get your criticisms at some point.
Yeah, well, and it's not that. I guess I'm just less of a Marvel fan
Okay.
overall, and like I said, it's okay. It goes back to the comics and really the grounding of the comics.
Mm.
But that's probably a different discussion too. So then, of course, second movie is going to come out. Now this, I remember back to Comic-Con when what Zack Snyder did was say, I'm going to have somebody come in and Harry Lennox walks up. He's going to read a part. It just has something to do with this. We kind of, and he reads from The Dark Knight Returns, and all they did was put on the screen the background of the Batman symbol with the Superman symbol in the middle.
Right.
And the whole hall goes crazy. And that's all they had. And that hyped up for that movie beyond anyone's expectations. Everybody was completely looking forward to everything Zack Snyder was doing. But at some point, and it gets really confusing. I followed it all from behind the scenes. It gets really confusing. It gets retold all the time to where it's mistold.
Mm.
So the Batman v Superman was coming out. This is a copy of the Ultimate Edition, which is the longer version.
Okay.
And as it was going, and as they released commercials for it, they were talking about what was going on. There's, you go into theories and everything else. But when you're watching the commercials, you're seeing what's happening, and it's explaining how the story's coming. If you're watching behind the scenes interviews and stuff like that, it's all, a story's being told about the movie and what's happening in the movie. And kind of what you have, well, again, what you have mostly is that corporate entity. Some people that are higher up, and when you get news leaked, it's from somebody that heard somebody that knows the person that's next to the executive. And I heard it very clearly that there was a screening and everybody loved it. And then you hear like, well, there was a screening for some execs and somebody said it wasn't that great, or something.
Right.
And then you start hearing how the screening said, oh, it wasn't that great. So they got to change stuff. But somehow, that exec is up there like, and I don't know how Zack Snyder did this, but he got in his contract where he was allowed to speak a little more than some directors are allowed to. Mm-hmm. And right before the movie came out, he said, when it comes out on Blu-ray, you're going to get the Ultimate Edition, which has the 30 minutes more cut all correctly so that you see the full movie that I, wanted you to see. And then we're going to, something he probably announced it was going to be put in theaters, or he wanted it to be. I mean, he told us that before the movie came out. So I was like, okay, I understand now it's going to be cut down but he's still telling this story, and certain things are going to be cut out, so you have to really pay attention, right? And not everybody's told that. So it comes out. I really ought to go back and talk more about some of that, so we'll do that in just a second. But
Man, you were really paying attention.
And when Batman versus Superman came out, critics came out and hated on it. Okay. And some of them had some valid reasons. Some of them claimed editing. I'm not sure how many of them really didn't like it, and how much of it was just the criticism wants to hate on. It's like somehow it's popular to like Marvel movies or the format of it. And if something's different than that in format, and it's a comic book movie,
You
it's
have
all
a
hypocritical
very
stuff
good point
too.
there. Yeah, you have a very good point there. The comparison.
It's super hypocritical stuff too, because they'll want Hellboy or something like that out, and that's going to be a completely different movie than Iron Man.
Right.
But they're like, no, that's the way it should be. You know, Deadpool's going to come out, and that absolutely has to be this terrible, raunchy, you know, awful, hard R thing, or it's not going to work as a comic book movie.
Right.
Like, yeah, it could work as a comic book movie, doing it a different way. And I heard a lot of things. I was into a talk show about, you know, movies at the time, and they were always going through stuff and discussing theories and stuff. So okay, it all could be done differently. But anyway, going back to this, so but again, somehow it's become a popular thing, not just among some fans, but even in the critics, to think Marvel has got the only formula you should follow. And again, hypocritical one, and then, you know, it's just not accurate.
And then it creates, I hate to interject, then it creates a false expectation as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if they're expecting Batman versus Superman and Man of Steel, and that's what I want to go back to in a minute, to be just like how Marvel interacts, that's just not the way it's going to be. Or that's not the way it should be. You could do it,
right,
but you shouldn't do it. But that's going back to that vision. And the thing is that Marvel has its fans, DC has its fans. Just to go back for a second to comics, there's differences between the comics. The comics, to me, Marvel has always been that story of like trying to show a person in life, if that makes sense.
It does.
And like the struggles of Spider-Man in high school and everything, and then he's a superhero on top of that.
Right.
The mutants, X-Men, things like that, appeals to oddballs in society.
Right.
You know, they say, I'm weird, so I'm like these people, and what is that struggle there? And that's one way of telling the story. And then DC generally has this story of the more broad mythology gods dealing with people. People are not the subjects, you know, but it's still the audience. So it's a different thing.'re not looking at ourselves in the DC story necessarily.
I never thought about it that way. It's a good way. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. It's a very good way to put it.
And I watched your video on that Batman comic, and you mentioned that his profitability. He's by far the most profitable character in DC, and they, for some reason, they keep his comics right, I guess.
To some degree, because they did. I haven't read the comic. I don't know which exact comic it was, but they did try to infuse some. And I hate to use the term wokeness. I don't necessarily want to use wokeness. Let's say forced agendas, I guess is the easiest way to put it, because wokeness is a whole nother issue, even though that does happen in comics. But I think what you see happening is forced agendas, which I guess to some degree you can say is wokeness. But anyway, I digress.
Okay. And unfortunately, I don't read all those. I do know that Superman just has one or two comics, and it's sold a lot less. And Batman has multiple iterations that they're going through, or different runs.
They are.
Whatever they call it.
Yeah, different
So
runs.
yeah, then by far he's doing better. He's the best selling with like 5 or 6 different types of comics, and everybody else is just below that somewhere.
I think if I'm not mistaken, Batman might be one of the most recognized heroes like worldwide. Some people say Superman. I get it. Superman is recognized for his own.
Those two probably are the most recognized,
right?
If you get down to it, that, and then probably Wonder Woman. People would say is we'll put the top 10. They're all in the top 10 for sure. Nowadays, of course, I think Hulk probably would have been for a long time, and then
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yep, good.
Spider-Man for sure. Yeah, we won't argue about it's 1 through 10, but within those top 10, there's a bunch of them like that. But and I'd have to look back to when I was watching and not paying attention. Once McFarlane started his own
Spider-Man.
No, he came in on Spider-Man, but then he made his own comic.
Spawn. Yeah, that's when Image Comics started.
That Image Comics?
It was Todd McFarlane, Brett Booth, Jim Lee, Mark Silverstreet. Yeah.
I started kind of getting out of comics at that time, so I don't know if, how popular all those people are. So I watch more movies than I do actually read the comics.
Okay.
Stuff like that, but... So back to this though, of course, like I said, he was allowed to say, we're going to give you the, Ultimate Edition right away. And once the Ultimate Edition was released, almost every critic that was hating the movie turned and loved the movie, which should have taught what WB the lesson immediately. Every one of your critics that hated your movie, except a few fools that just wanted to be right or whatever and can't change, they all changed their mind. They all said, this is what should have been released. This was perfect. This told the entire story. This was great. This is exactly what you should have done. And basically, listen to Zack Snyder. He knows what he's doing.
That is a fact.
So, and after that, of course, comes out Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad should have taught them that also, because they messed it up as well. They, at the last second, butchered it. So there's a campaign going on to try to get the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad too.
Why is
if you haven't heard of it?
This seems like a common theme with DC right now. Like the director's cuts and the afterthoughts. Like those are the good movies, but that's not the ones they went with. What? I don't understand that. The direct. I hate to interject, but you got me riled up now because these are things that make me mad. The director's cut of Justice League was so good that I watched all, what was it, 4 hours? I watched that thing all the way through and was thrilled and thought to myself, why did anyone go with what they released cinematically? Like, to me, it was an affront to fans. When I saw the director's cut, I was like incensed. I was so mad. Like, they could have released that in 2 separate movies. Like, they already had movie 1 and movie 2 all in that director's cut easily.
Yeah, it could have been that. Of course, it could have all just been one movie at that time. There was somewhat added to it to flesh it out after he was allowed to do it. But that gets into another very long story. But 4 hours is amazing. Just but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Okay. I know you just got me hyped when you started talking about
the release the Snyder cut. of course, that's later. So, but the Suicide Squad came out, and yeah, we're seeing a pattern. And that's what I'm saying. We're seeing a pattern where they're saying is there is a darkness to the movies of DC, of this run of DC, as it were, a an an existing darkness. And I don't know enough about the Ayer cut to know what it's supposed to be, but
Right.
they wanted to turn it into the fun. You know, they wanted to turn it into the jokey, quick cut stuff that they did. You know, more rock music and stuff like that. That's kind of the little I know about it. And when it was released, now this is the weird part about it is that now see I would have to go back to Suicide Squad and try to figure out how I could follow it better. But there's a lot of criticisms about that just were ridiculous, that didn't make any sense and didn't really go into, say, somebody really disliking the movie.
Right.
They pick on it. I don't know how to explain it. Just
Do you think it's maybe Marvel fanboys that want to now? I will fully admit I'm a Marvel fanboy. Marvel was my universe of choice before Image Comics back in the day. Image Comics took the place of Marvel for a long while until they kind of they're still around, but they faded away as far as their original glory. But do you think that maybe Marvel fanboys kind of fomented that? Because there's a lot of people that have this either or mentality. Like DC, if Marvel succeeds, DC can't succeed. And it's like, hey, there can be two. These two things can exist at the same time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There's some of it there. They're always the loudest. That's really what I find. Is
probably right.
The worst sounding people always get the most
squeaky wheel gets the oil
somehow.
that's
yeah, it's like you and I could agree that both of them can exist and nothing's wrong with going to either one of them and enjoying both of them, but one person is screaming that it's just Marvel or it's just DC. It doesn't matter which way. And that person will be heard over both of us. Because there's, you know what it is? There's no controversy there. Once you're saying, I like this movie, it's really good. You know, it's a good movie. But if you say, I hated it because, Suicide Squad. She looked like one of those things you see outside of a car lot that's flopping around. That took 1.5 seconds on screen.
Right.
And it's a conjuring move that makes perfect sense for a witch.
Right.
And, you know, Scarlet Witch probably did something similar to that in a half-second scene. Nobody said anything about it. Right. And that's the kind of thing. That's an illegitimate complaint. It's like, that doesn't even make sense. It's funny, make you laugh, and there's controversies. Like, it was so stupid that it just took me out of the movie. Okay, if you say so.
Hating just for the sake of hating.
Just for the sake of hating. And like you said, if there's not controversy, you don't get hurt. It's the same thing with all kinds of areas in life. Probably not getting anything biblical here, but controversy is what steals, you know, people's attention.
Oh, that's a fact.
If Carson, you can get controversial.
You were going to say something, Carson?
Yeah, I think that the controversy, people not getting heard, boils down to if somebody is like a news spot, somebody being on that news spot talking about that, it's not gonna the news spot isn't gonna sell if that person is just, oh yeah, this is good, this is good, this is good. Nothing's gonna be different enough for someone to want to look at that and view that, and all across the internet. If you don't get clicks, you're not going to make any money. So the best way to get clicks is have a controversial opinion about it.
Bad news sells.
Right. So controversy is what sells. Thinking that it looks good is not going to sell. So,
well, that's, it's harder. And this goes back to Star Wars. The dark side is easier, faster. It's more accessible. I
Right.
forget exactly how Yoda put it. So it's not stronger. It's just easier. It's easier to be angry, mad, and do something fast,
Mm.
and use that power.
Man, talk about
But
getting biblical. You definitely get biblical with that one.
I'm trying to go to Star Wars. So but yeah, so Yoda is teaching us a lesson. You can still be good, and you can still promote things well that way, even controversially that way, but in a good way. But it's harder. It takes longer. It doesn't fit as well into the mindset of today, which is like very quick. Give me an answer, Popular atheism, that's getting biblical again, but
Ain't nothing
they
wrong with
have
that. I do it
they've
sometime on
got
my.
things real fast. They say, well, what about this? And it's okay, I can explain that to you, but it takes about 30 minutes to go through the explanation. We can't have that. You have to have a 1 minute blurb or nobody believes you.
Right.
It's like, no, sorry, it's not.
Our
We can help,
our
but it
our
takes
attention
longer.
span has been purposely shortened, in my
It is.
opinion. That's getting into conspiracy, but anyway.
So yeah, so as we going back to Suicide Squad, but it was cut poorly. It was a good enough movie. And when you look at the box office, though, for the first 3 movies, and doing the Marvel comparison, compare the first 3 movies. DC is killing Marvel monetarily if you just compare those 3. Now, if you go to comparing the same movies that are coming out from Marvel in those 3 years or something to DC, you're going to have a different comparison because again, Marvel's been building on each other. So it all when people talk about a battle between Marvel and DC, if we're going by box office, DC had beat out Marvel and got ahead of them, and actually won the monetary race. If you got to go and look into it, beyond Avengers, when they got to Justice League basically, because you got Wonder Woman and then Justice League comes out. Aquaman comes out after that, and
Which
Iron
I
Man 3
enjoyed.
is out. Now that's where they might have started breaking even because Aquaman, broke $1 billion somewhere. And it was a great movie too. So, but kind of getting ahead of myself. But all the people that want to fight about that kind of thing, just I just point out monetarily, DC beat them up to that point. And I haven't gone beyond that in analysis, but we can bring in Joker and stuff like that, the Batman, even whatever their box office, and just compare it movie by movie. We're going to have a lot less movies, so we're not getting into the end game. We don't have anywhere near to that, as far as getting to that point. So, there's some things that people fight about that you always have to say which perspective we want to take it. I would rather say there's not really a battle, and that's where I think the Warner Brothers has messed themselves up. And of course, they've now changed hands and everything, so we're kind of at a different slate, and hopefully it all goes forward from there. But they were the ones that are like, we're in the competition with Marvel, so we got to be like Marvel to compete on their level, and we got to do what they want to. So a lot of people say like DC was rushing to get to Justice League. There's a sense in which that was, but again, Zack Snyder was doing it right, the best way it could be done. I think he was pushed to have the Doomsday in there. In interviews, he's claimed that's not the real Doomsday. That's a type of Doomsday. There's still a different one floating out there. So,
Justice
if you
League
really,
3.
yeah, if you follow all these things well enough, you can get more hope in DC than just saying, hey, they've messed up so bad, we don't know if they can ever be back on track. Hey, I don't think they've gotten that far off track
I agree
because because they put out the Justice League from Joss Whedon, the 2-hour shortcut. I'll leave that mostly alone because if everybody will just forget it and walk away from it and use Zack Snyder's Justice League, there won't be an issue.
It'll become the 80s Marvel movies. Can't find it
Something like
anywhere.
that. Can't find it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Don't promote it.
So we talked about this. Me and Zeke talked about this on the Geek Stack podcast. You mentioned something, and this is exactly the conclusion we came to. The problem is assuming that DC has to do the same thing Marvel did and linking all of these movies and having them all come together for this big cohesive plot. I'm not saying you have to abandon that idea, but I like what they did with the Batman because it was completely separate from anything else they have going on. This was year one Batman. So I'm like, I like this. I like this. We're getting an origin story without getting an origin story, right? Because we've never seen year one Batman cinematically. We've never seen novice Batman. He couldn't have, and the complaints I heard about the Batman, it in some ways, it kind of upset me because I was like, do you guys realize that this is an adaptation of year one, year two Batman? This is before the gadgets. This is before the defined fighting style. This is the brawler. And what I liked about it is you got to see more of the detective. But anyway, I digress again. I'll let you continue. I just had to get on my soapbox.
All right. I won't challenge you on any of that for now.
I could see you thinking like, maybe not so much.
It's year two, yeah. But and I went back and read year one. Just I know I did years ago and went back to read it. And when I did and watched the movie, I was like, I don't see it. I don't see it as much as some people are saying, but I may be a little more critical about it.
I hear you.
Than others. But yeah, I mean, but that's what I'm saying is that Warner Brothers production, Warner Brothers money thinkers and stuff like that are more thinking, hey, we gotta do this, we gotta do it fast, and we can make as much money as them doing it. Like, no, you really can't. And to jump into the history, you go back to Marvel. They didn't start out with Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk and stuff like that. Kevin Feige and Avi Arad and all the others were doing things back. X-Men, the other Hulk, Ang Lee's Hulk, which is a really cool, good film too, and people just are underrated all the time. Wouldn't fit into the cinematic universe, but
good movie nonetheless.
Yeah, it's a good film, and it was really coolly done to make it look like a comic. That was really, I always thought that was awesome. But yeah, I'm not advocating for it though. But maybe just watch it again and see how it is. But yeah, all that stuff, Daredevil, people hate on a lot of stuff that Kevin Feige was definitely involved in before.
Right.
But then they cut it all off and say, oh, that's out of our minds. They like the X-Men probably. But
so you're talking about the Ben Affleck Daredevil.
Ben Affleck Daredevil, right. The Fantastic Four movies.
I have my thoughts about that, but
all that stuff.
I'll leave that for another day.
Well, all I'm saying is that Kevin Feige, in the experience of doing those movies, said, okay, this is what we have to do. And that's what started them on the right track.
He figured some things out. I see what you're saying.
He figured
some things out.
Yeah. So, and we could look back at DC, and we ought to be able to figure some things out and look at, Superman, Superman 2, Superman 3, Superman 4. By then, we should have figured something out, about Superman.
Agree. I think I don't know how you feel about the Man of Steel, but I loved the Man of Steel.
Right. Fantastic.
I thought this was Superman Unleashed. This is the Superman movie we all needed and didn't know it.
Yep. That's a good way to put it too. It gets better. I watched. People think I'm crazy. I watched that movie in theaters. I believe. I'll just say over 500 times.
What? What? Are
So,
you serious? 500 times?
I
You could've-
believe,
you
if I'm
could've-
not incorrect, I watched it several times a day.
You
I
went
think-
to the theater. Were you working in the theater at the time? Like how did this?
No, I just took some, vacation days, time off, stuff like that, and then spent the day
Wow.
watching it
I
three
mean-
times.
You are dedicated.
And
Carson,
then went to the cheap theater and watched it over and over.
Carson,
Now,
you were going to
at the
interject.
time-
I could own a Wii. I could own a PlayStation 5. Oh no, we had to go to the movie theater 500 times.
At the time, probably half of them were in the cheap theater, where it's like $2 each time. So that's
500 times. That's $1,000.
it's probably like that. Yeah.
That's a lot. So
It is possible that I'm miscalculating and thinking of the time in the theater plus the times right when it came out on disc, and I'd watch it on repeat.
Man, you really
anytime I had time off.
You mean you'd sleep to it on repeat?
slept.
No, I sleep more now than then.
No, you slept a lot.
You
then.
weren't here, okay? You weren't here.
Yes, I was.
No, you actually weren't here.
We get the debate.
Yeah.
So let me.
So yeah, I love the movie, and you see things the more you watch it too.
Okay.
And if you listen to the behind the scenes and watch all the special features on the Superman, the DVD, Blu-ray, you get a lot of stuff because there's a lot of background to it, and a lot of things went into it. And for me, it really homaged John Byrne's revamping of Superman. When I started actually reading it, then I was like, "This is what I read." Brought to life on the screen. It's not only that too, but it's that I saw a lot of it there. And there's so much homage to. I just mentioned one thing to the original, the 1978 movie Superman. The one thing I'll mention is that both of them start out on Krypton, similar, same thing, and they both take the exact same amount of time. And then they jump to Earth, and then they take off in a different way on Earth.
Interesting.
But, yeah,
I didn't know that. I
go back and check.
I didn't watch it 500 times, so there's no way for me to know.
It's basically, I think, 20 minutes on Krypton. 20 minutes on Krypton on both of those films.
So do you remember like the script? I'm sure after watching it 500 times, you could probably quote verbatim.
Yeah, it's been too long since I've watched it, though. I need to go back and watch it. I've watched it recently.
And Carson is like, no, you don't need to go back and watch it.
Went back and watched the three of them in a row as much as I could, anyway. But yeah, I agree that is a spectacular Man of Steel. I think every time I read a criticism about it, I might have been too harsh on the critic, because I was like, it's weird because almost every one of them I heard was like, we want the Superman like the classic Superman. I'm forgetting the director's name, Richard Donner. We want that. That's the Superman we want.
Right.
And I said, you got that. Superman Returns was the Richard Donner brought back to life, and
that wasn't so
you
good.
claim to hate it.
Yeah, that wasn't so good. I don't know if it's...
And it depends on when you came into that, because when it first released, it was awesome, and then the critics started taking the turn that it was not so great.
I didn't like it. I was in the theater saying I don't like it. When I saw it,
like it,
I did not like it. Was not a fan.
It depends on what you're looking at. So I go back and look at it like most people would say. There's a thing called Oliver Harper on YouTube, does a retrospective.
Okay.
and I'm pretty sure he's the one that mentioned it, said in these terms, at least, that it's a character study. It's a slower movie. It's like what would happen if Superman left and then came back, and this is a follow-up to Superman 2,
right.
in fact.
You know what? I'll give you that, because when you look at the Batman, you could kind of say the same thing about the Batman. It's more of a character study of him than it is a Batman movie. It's almost like an inside view into the makeup of Batman more than watching Batman in Gotham City.
Yeah, you could say that. And before I get sidetracked or anything, again, I should say. But yeah, so those are the kinds of criticisms that I think I kept hearing. It's like, oh, this is just not my Superman because I love Richard Donner's. So, well, they tried that, and then y'all didn't want it, and now you want that, and it was weird. It's like there's no action in Superman Returns. There's very little action. It's like the airplane catching was about all there was, and then and then that was it. Yeah, and then this has a lot of action. That's either we're criticizing before. You didn't have enough action. Superman's got to fight, and got to have these different things. And there was a lot of repeats. It was like a Force Awakens version of Superman, or
right.
Star Wars doing too much of a repeat. But then again, we're not talking about Star Wars.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say
controversy with that too.
You can get me going with Star Wars. There's some things they've done right, and there's a lot of things they've done wrong. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, but before we go down that rabbit trail, which we can, I don't mind, but I'll tell you this too. I like to enjoy things. So when I go and see something that people are hating, I don't necessarily look for those same things to hate. I look for whatever I can to say, hey, this is good. Because, if I'm going to spend my money, I'm like, it's got to be a good reason to do that, right? So,
agreed. You know what? I've taken this same approach in my comic book collecting. I know and I understand that comic books, to some degree, have done some different things that are not necessarily friendly to all of the fans. But that doesn't mean that all of comic bookdom is to be tossed away, because I've read a lot of people hated the Jane Foster run of Thor.
Mm-hmm.
I particularly thought it was great. Like, I read it and I was like, I'm not seeing the same things that these critics are seeing. Like, there's many people that felt like they felt like the woke agenda, I guess, infested that book because Jane Foster, why did she become Thor? But when you look at the story, I was like, but the story is good. Like, this is not just a tossed together story that doesn't mesh. This is a good story with good art. But anyway, I digress again.
Yeah, it's outside of my realm. I've never read that run. So,
Carson, you had a thought?
I got a question about that.
Okay.
Is the Jane Foster run the same run where Gore is introduced?
Yes.
Okay.
Not necessarily introduced, because Gore the God Butcher is a character that's been around for years.
2018 or 2012. 2012.
I think he was first introduced before that, if I'm not mistaken, like years ago. But I could be mistaken. I'll have to look that up. But
he's probably looking it up.
Yeah, it's a good run. If you're into Thor, that's one of Thor's better runs in this generation. My humble opinion. Anyway, continue.
2012, Jason Aaron and Esad Ribic.
Okay.
Interesting. So we'll get back to all of this. Where were we exactly? Of course, Man of Steel, starting it, excellent. Batman vs. Superman, the Ultimate Edition, is the way it should be viewed, is just absolutely amazing still. If you've got your fans of it and you've got critics of it, but like I said, the critics did not like the theatrical for whatever reason. Every one of them changed. And then Suicide Squad came out. It was liked more by audiences because people went and saw it. They were making money. But for whatever reason, they said Batman versus Superman didn't make $1 billion or didn't make as much as Avengers. I think Avengers had just come out the year before or something like that. Or a couple years before, 2015. And, yeah, the year before then. Something like that. I can't remember now.
I'm looking it up.
Let me see if there's a year on here.
2012, the first Avengers film.
2012, the first Avengers.
Mhm.
Yep.
And then Man of Steel came out in 2013, 2015 or 16?
16 alongside, or just
Batman v
a
Superman?
few months before. Yeah, Batman v Superman was a couple months before Civil War.
Mm,
It was
okay.
originally planned to be on the same day.
Oh, yeah, I know. I understand. And then it moved and everything. That's another part of the background of the whole story, too. That we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, before these things came out, or after Man of Steel and before anything else, Zack Snyder was interviewed and talked about Marvel and the DC and Marvel issue of kind of comparison, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's a good thing to watch because he does not hate on Marvel or down Marvel. He says that they're doing what they do and that DC shouldn't try to copy them or emulate them.
He is 100% correct.
DC tells its stories a different way. It's and it should be told the way it's told. Now, all the criticisms about DC is so not funny and stuff, it's a different humor. You know, it's not that there's no humor there. You know, you hear Henry Cavill couldn't smile throughout all of Man of Steel. That's absolutely ridiculous. He smiles multiple times. It's just a different way of telling a story. It's got a different weight to it
I think
than some things. Go ahead.
I think it's just like people are not used to seeing or to not seeing superheroes crack jokes in the middle of a world-ending event where everyone on planet Earth will die. Oh, haha, that's funny.
Relieve the tension. Yeah. Relieve the tension in a different way, though. I mean, why can't you? You know, if it doesn't have to be the jokes, and that was the point. Is Zack Snyder didn't say that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. That's fine. That's one way to do it, but he did it a different way, and you're not necessarily only relieving tension by jokes. One of the greatest scenes of Man of Steel is Zod screaming at Martha, "Where is the Codex?" And you turn and see Superman smash into him and take him through the cornfield, punching him in the face. You think you could threaten my mother and bust through a corn, stall, silo or whatever, and then go through the gas station, right? And that's a relief through this like cheer, like, yeah, that's exactly right. That's what would happen if you were messing with my mother,
Right.
that kind of thing. And
Relief
it's not
without humor. Right.
It's
Right.
not humor, but it was perfect.
Right.
You couldn't
it's
tell a
possible.
joke there in that situation and get the same thing at all, and if people looked at it right, they wouldn't, it's a easy way to get a criticism out there that's just really not legitimate too.
And misplaced jokes can really destroy a movie. And for evidence,
exactly.
Thor: Love and Thunder. Thor: Love and Thunder just
Here we go.
just was not good. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but it just was not good.
I only say overall it was fairly good for certain things. And probably if we talked through it, then you'd see my point, and I would see yours too. Because Callista doesn't like it for some reason. One of them being like so teenagerish with their relationships. Why do they have to be teenagers or like they were teenagers, acting so awkward and weird. You know, there's that was one of her big criticisms of it. And I can say, yeah, I see what you're saying. They
I
were
agree with
really
her.
playing it all for jokes.
Yeah, I agree with her 100% on that.
Yeah, so, and I can say that, and basically I just shrug that part off and then say, okay, I like this, and this thing that I do enjoy.
I see
And
you're taking actually a really good approach, and I commend you for that. We have to realize that this is entertainment, and there is certain license that is taken with things, and you got to kind of account for that. So I can definitely see your point.
yeah, and to say this also, I'm not coming from it having read this series of books and saying, okay, this is my expectation, and I'm just accepting whatever's on the screen in those particular things. And I
Right.
try to do that with anything, even if, like, you know, I grew up with like John Byrne's Superman. It would be amazing to me if somebody took that and actually made it exactly, you know, something really close, and then continued it on and gave the actual comic run of the death of Superman,
Right.
and then his return if they, you know, chose to. And that's another thing that Warner Brothers has had on their mind forever. They're like, the best-selling comic book run maybe ever, I think at least a time, the death of Superman. So we have to kill Superman. That's what they were saying when Superman Returns came out. Got to kill Superman. So they killed him in the movie, if you didn't know.
Yeah, I watched it, and it was
Yeah,
I have
so
my
in a way,
thoughts on that.
They kill him in the movie, but it's like, that's not
Spoilers.
Doomsday. What are you doing?
Right.
They were gonna do a Death of Superman or Superman Returns
So
with
that's-
Nicolas Cage.
That's one of those
And-
things, like I was saying earlier, it was forced. Like you forced this,
Right.
and I could feel
They
it, and
want
it
it
did not feel good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They wanted it. They're like, you got to do it. And I'm fairly sure Zack Snyder and Chris Nolan probably at the beginning were like, we can't kill Superman in the first movie. What are you thinking? Probably had that meeting, you know?
Right.
And then when it came to the second movie, they're like, okay, you got to kill Superman now. How are we going to do this? Okay. And to satisfy them and pacify them, they did it the very best way that it could have possibly been done in the second movie.
Yeah, they did. I really don't like how they. This is where.
But no, if we wanted to go back, it should have been immediately. Immediately, they should have had a second Superman ready to go.
Yeah, I agree.
Immediately. But I think that's what I'm saying. I think the behind the scenes meetings, they were like, got to kill him.
They did
How are
what
we
they
gonna
could
do that?
Yeah, they did what they
We
could
got to
do.
do this kind of introducing Batman then somehow, and here's how, you know, the best way it's going to be done. Just to pacify them and say, hey, you know, keep the contract, don't let it go off to somebody else. It's not going to come anywhere near this vision. But no, if they were thinking right, if Warner Brothers was thinking right in the first place, then it didn't even have to be Zack Snyder. It could have been just somebody else. Do a Superman sequel, Man of Tomorrow, Man of Steel 2, whatever it could be called, anything, and do a story about Superman and his progression going forward there, and then come into Batman v Superman, because it's, you know, it's a whole year something later anyway. Right. And it could even sort of overlap. Those two movies could overlap. They could even still go back and do it.
The problem I had is they took elements from Flashpoint to bring everything to this culmination, because that Flashpoint is where Superman and Batman battled. That's where that came from. But then they tried to infuse some of Flashpoint in the vision that Batman got from the Flash. So I'm like, you took a story and you so disjointed and disconnected and stitched it back together. Like, I understand things need to be changed sometimes for the silver screen. I get it. But like you said, I will give them that. They did the best possible way they could have done it is what they did. I mean, you really couldn't have done it better than that, given what they...
And I'm saying also, given restrictions from the studio.
Right.
Because studios
Right.
should have been success with Superman immediately. This man is amazing. He's at the right age and everything. We have got to just go ahead and get Superman 2
So let me
and tell that story.
let me ask you
Tell
this.
some story.
Let me ask you this before you continue, because you clearly you have done your research on all of this stuff, and you know more about any of this than me, watching Superman 500 times. Why didn't they release another Superman within 2 years or so after Man of Steel? I never understood that.
Right. So I'm not privy to the really behind the scenes stuff. I just think that's where that stall is that the studio said was wanting to get to the superhero team up as fast as possible.
Right. You could sense that.
Yeah, they want to do that, and they didn't. They're not filmmakers, so they wouldn't have a clue of how to get there.
Right.
And comic book writers are not filmmakers, so when they're bringing in comic book writers for it, they're not going to get you there either. Like Jeff Johns, sorry, but he has no business involved with the movies. He's kind of was involved with some of the shows, and that's kind of where a comic book writer might belong. Stay with the shows because you can flesh out a
Good
show.
point. Yeah, good point.
Stay away from movies because you can't tell a story that way. So unless you're going to have 6-hour movies, that'd be fine.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that, but
I'm
you're
okay
not
with
going to
that
get
too.
a huge audience.
This is true. Sitting 6
So-
hours, yeah, it's hard. That's gonna be a hard sell.
But 3 hours, I think, is a pretty decent, thing when you're trying to tell a big story too.
Agreed.
But I think that's where they had some kind of stall where it's like, you got to do this. We want Superman to die because it's just going to make us all this money because everybody's going to come watch him die. It's like, what are you talking about? But you're not going to advertise it either, though. That's the other thing. They weren't like, it was a long time before they revealed that Doomsday was in the film.
Right.
And they, of course, wanted to sell it as Doomsday, the killer of Superman. But they did it at the very last second, even though people that have been paying attention knew that it was coming. But yeah, they're just, like I said, they trying to kill Superman is the bottom line of that. And then, like I said, they didn't let the Vision just continue, or let Zack Snyder give somebody, recommend somebody to do a follow-up Superman immediately while he continues and looks toward the story that they're trying to push for.
Right.
So if there was that intermediate movie of Superman Man of Tomorrow or something like that, where he's going through what he's doing, he's saving people and stuff like that, and he expresses it in Batman v Superman. Because Batman says, or Bruce Wayne, when he's talking to Bruce Wayne, I can't get the quote in my head, but he says that you write a puff piece about a man that could burn the world, if he wanted to. And Clark responds, most people don't feel that way. So if you told a story of seeing the interaction and seeing what's going on, and then brought that perspective of Batman in, where it's like, you see what's going on, Clark has this perspective where he's seeing people that he's saving. You can see it in the visuals in Batman v Superman, and you've got to place it as if he's been doing this for the whole year. So, the person reaching up from the housetop and he's floating over them, and the people, standing around in Mexico and all that.
Right.
Everybody loves Superman when he's near and he's saving their lives.
Right.
But then there starts to be a controversy. You hear the controversy on TV from fake news and all that. And you see Batman having this perspective.
Fake news.
You have the Batman perspective. The Batman perspective is really that, sure, he could be good, but 20 years down the line,
who is he going to be?
Who do you have?
Right.
And I kind of also take that as he didn't lose Robin too long ago. Is never said when he lost Robin.
Mm.
But when did he lose Robin? Probably just within the last year or two. And it's like everything's like pounding on him after 20 years in
Right.
Gotham.
That would have made him a little more what's the word? Cynical?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
He's at this point where he's like, yeah, he's doing good now, but he could do this. And we can't let him in it. We can't let this keep happening because Batman's lost, however many people from just people that go crazy that have some sort of power out there to do things.
Right.
I think I think that Batman v Superman would have been recepted a lot better, and it would mean a lot more if there was a second Superman movie and a first Batman movie before Batman v Superman. So then there would be some kind of build up, some kind of understanding behind Batman because he hadn't been introduced before that. It would be a lot. It could be a lot more fleshed out.
Both, yeah, you could put them both there. You could do that still. That's the thing. To tell the story, Ben Affleck could come back and do Batman a couple of years prior before Superman arrives, and then
So do you think maybe one of the problems, to Carson's point, was that people didn't understand that this is an older Bruce Wayne? Because I think there's many people who didn't understand that this is an older Bruce Wayne.
I don't think it's necessarily about understanding as much as it is like, well, there's two things. They want to see it. That's part of it. They want to see the things we're talking about.
Show not tell.
So, if this would have to go a different route, though, you'd have to start out the world with Batman, Ben Affleck's Batman, because it's got to be a few years before,
right?
And he's got Robin, and you got to somehow build that in. I don't think it could have been necessarily done better if there was a movie for each of them in between, like Man of Steel. I think one Man of Steel movie could have been done and kind of introducing that there's a Batman somehow out there. Although you can wait till Batman v Superman to introduce Batman, just like they did. As far as telling this story, and then you're telling it from like a Superman-centric beginning perspective, and that would have been fine. Instead of saying, well, let's take Batman back before Superman existed and tell that story. Unless you do it later, like you do Wonder Woman. You introduce Wonder Woman, Batman v Superman, and then at the beginning of the movie, here's your picture, and tell the story of her origin.
What Wonder Woman was a great movie. The first one. Mm-hmm. The first, I love that first movie. The second movie was a little, the story seemed rushed and it seemed not flushed out enough. But maybe I'm being too super critical, but I didn't expect it to be the first movie. I went in fully knowing, okay, this is not going to be the first movie, but I think it
wasn't fleshed out much.
Yeah, it just wasn't fleshed out enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and we could get into talking about that too. But when you go into Wonder Woman, that was a lot of influence from Zack Snyder in that. Just building into it. There's so much behind the scenes with that. In the picture, for instance, Zack Snyder's actually in the background when they took the picture.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he's in the film in Wonder Woman, in uniform.
Oh, snap. See, you got all the inside info.
Cool. Well, this is just behind the scenes stuff on the Blu-rays. You can watch those for the most part.
500 hours.
But I have watched some interviews. Yeah, lost hours. But no, it's so that's where this pattern shows up that Warner Brothers should learn. but never did. That's the problem. They never learned. So they've all lost their jobs now, and Discovery's kicked them all out. I think maybe Walter Hamada's sitting around for a little bit, just tokenly. But no, they should have figured it out, and a long time ago. Or at least once they released Zack Snyder's Justice League. Oh my goodness, it's like they decided to immediately come out bashing the idea of having Zack Snyder's vision continuing.
That which is crazy, because that
insane.
When I watched, let me just say, when I watched the director's cut of Justice League, 4 hours, I sat there through all 4 hours, entertained, interested, and engaged for all 4 hours. And at the end of that, I thought to myself, so when does Zack Snyder become president of, DC Entertainment? When does he take the reins and take over all of this? Because it doesn't have to be cohesive necessarily to movies like Marvel, as you said, but you at least need a central figure with a vision that actually works. And it's clear that he had a vision that actually worked. Why they went with anything else is beyond me. I will never understand that.
All right. Now, yeah, so talking about that, so if you're going to have a DCEU and you're going to have these different characters all interacting, I think it's not a bad idea to do the way they're doing, which could be in a similar way like Marvel's doing. The idea that's coming to my mind is basically that Marvel has a cinematic universe. Spider-Man's a part of it now, but he wasn't a part of it.
Right.
So they had other Spider-Man. They were okay. They could have been okay.
Yeah.
Sony's releasing their own kind of version of things.
I have something
separate type of universe, and I mean, this works theoretically with me. No matter what anybody else says, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a different universe than Sony's Venom. Okay,
yeah.
And Sony has multiple verses, though. Multiple universes, because you got Tobey Maguire's and you got Andrew Garfield's universe.
So, Carson, before you continue, what were your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts is the thing with DC's universe is that they don't have an overarching plan. So Marvel, they come out at Comic-Con and put up the phases, and then you can see every project that's going on and where it's leading up to. DC, they never do that. They just announce this here, announce this there, but it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. And so, like, if it was going somewhere, I think people would be way more invested with it. But yeah, that's pretty much my thought with that is that the DC universe is not, it doesn't feel like it's in the same universe. It feels like there's a cameo here, but it's just a bunch of different stories that they say are in the same universe because, oh, there's this person in this movie and there's this person in this movie. But it doesn't feel like it's an actual universe because it's not getting somewhere.
Okay, so Don, do you feel that it's necessary? Like, is it necessary for them to do what Marvel did and show, okay, this is where we're going? Because I'll say before you answer, even though Marvel is showing where their different phases are going, Marvel is failing right now. Personally, I believe, cinematically wise, even though we know the direction they're going in, yeah, it's not a good direction. And just because I know where you're going doesn't mean that this is going to work anyway. I'll digress and let you.
No, I think you're right. Yeah. They're almost at this same thing. That might be, there might be a reason for that we can get into too. But my response is that's not wrong and it may be taking it from the point of view that's saying we've got all this in Marvel. Why isn't DC doing the same thing? Well, DC should not necessarily do the same thing. DC didn't come up with that formula. DC doesn't have the people that know how the formula works looking at their stuff. I always think when I see these things that Warner Brothers could have hired me to watch their movies, and I could say, listen, this is where you're going wrong. Don't do this, because every single time that's exactly what the problem is, that they then can't correct because it's already done and in the movie. So it could be that way. It sort of started out that way. It's like you got Man of Steel. Well, we're leading up to Justice League, and there's going to be these things in the middle. Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman, they're coming out between Batman vs Superman and Justice League. I mean, they were putting them out, fast. They essentially had Zack Snyder's Justice League available back in 2017. Maybe just give him a little bit more time. They're money hungry, because they wanted to release it so they could get their bonuses. And then they're like, well, plus we're fighting. That's the whole thing. Why? You don't need to fight. Don't fight Marvel.
Yeah, stop.
We're not in a crossover with Marvel yet.
Right.
We haven't got that amalgam comic yet.
Stop throwing punches.
They need to do that. They would make so much money. I would watch that 500 times in the theater.
Okay.
you
need to go to college, man.
You have awoken Carson. he's awake now.
But I don't have the first amalgam comic. I had the last three, but I never had the first one. So I could never read the first comic. That's one of the worst feelings ever. We never had the first one.
I know I used to have it. This is
probably sold it.
Who knows? But yeah, so I think it was just like Batman fighting somebody, and I can't even remember who they were.
It was Marvel, just the whole on Marvel versus DC.
Yeah, I know.
Like
I don't. You know what?
Universe versus universe.
I think to your point, Don. I think DC goes wrong every time when they view it as a battle between them and Marvel. It's not. I like DC for why I like DC, and I like Marvel for why I like Marvel. And I don't need DC to try to be Marvel, and I don't need Marvel to try to be DC. DC's a darker universe, led, in my opinion, by Batman. Marvel is a lighter universe. You could say it's led by multiple different people. You could say Iron Man. You could say Spider-Man. You could say X-Men. You could say Avengers. Marvel doesn't really necessarily, in my opinion, have a central figure like DC does. I think, I don't know if you disagree or not, I think it's widely accepted that Batman is the central figure of DC. Like this is the man, in my opinion. Of course, I'm biased because I'm a Batman fan, but anyway.
I think Marvel used to have that with Iron Man, starting out with Iron Man, everything coming together with Iron Man.
But that's the cinematic universe, though.
The movies are
right.
The comics are different, yeah.
Right. Comics, yeah.
And that's exactly it. That's exactly it. They don't need to be fighting. DC doesn't need to pattern itself after Marvel. Marvel doesn't need to pattern itself after DC. Although that did start happening at the time of Civil War.
Right.
The
credit scenes,
the directors, writers came out for Civil War and said, ice cream is good, and you have chocolate ice cream every single night. Eventually, you're not going to care about it.
Right.
And they were meaning you're telling the same you're going through the same movies and telling the same kind of story over and over again. You got to change it in some way. And again, me listening behind the scenes for it all and watching the two movies very carefully too, saw where Civil War was taking things from the story the Batman v Superman was telling. All studios do this where they're sharing stories with each other. That's why you have Armageddon and Deep Impact coming out like at the same time. Two movies about something coming going to
Right.
destroy the Earth, you know,
Pretty
and then
much
tell
the
the
same
story
movie.
a different way.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same movie, and then not even talking about all the knockoffs that you get down the line too. And then
Top Gunner.
yeah. So
Let me find that.
uh, but yeah, it's just like that. They have their spies and they're sharing information like, oh, let me put that into this story. And you see a shift in the way they tell the stories, and it does get darker, more somber a little bit in the Marvel universe. And it works for a few movies up until Endgame, I would say, is over. And then they've got to redirect something. They can't go all the way toward a Zack Snyder kind of vision.
Right.
But they did do an incorporation. You can just see it. But it doesn't work for DC to do that. First of all, you got too many people. Oh my goodness, come on. But first of all, you've got too many movies of Marvel that build up, so people are going to go see it, whether or not they feel like they're interested. You know,
Right.
you don't have to hype up a Marvel movie much. A DC movie, they apparently do have to hype it up as much as they possibly can. They hype up the movies that flop and fail. I didn't even write down some of the ones like Harley Quinn. I didn't write that down.
What surprised me, excuse me, I got to interject one more time, is the haymakers. When DC released Shazam, that was a haymaker. That was a movie that I did not expect to like. And when I walked out of the theater, I was like, holy crap, I love this movie. Like, this movie was just good. You know why I loved it? It was so different than anything Marvel had put out. It was so, like, what I saw was so unexpected that I was like, this was just good, because it was just a DC movie, like, directed, story told, and composed in a way that made sense for DC. It didn't feel like I was watching a rehashed Marvel movie with DC characters.
Right. So, and it's that, and it makes sense with that character too.
True.
So it's not like trying to make Batman into Shazam, which is the idea in Justice League. Well, I don't really want to go there. Man. So yeah, let's stay away from that for a moment. Let's try to stay with the good part. So
light side.
We'll save that for another podcast.
Yeah, when you see Zack Snyder's influence in the movies, that's when you're seeing a good movie. The Aquaman movie, to me, follows Zack Snyder's perfectly. There's a little bit that we could discuss, like Zack Snyder's Justice League and Justice League 2. When they create the bubble to talk in, okay. But to me, that was just me interpreting it. When she does that, when she creates the bubble, and the bubble's created by Valko also to talk to Arthur, near that shrine area.
Right.
When they do that. That's just the way Zack Snyder decided to do it, and for whatever reason, what's his name, that directed Aquaman, is it Wan? James Wan.
Yeah,
James Wan decided not to do it that way, but to me, I can say, well, it's a translation of their squeaking sounds that Mira makes in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Sounds like a dolphin or whatever. She's talking to them through the water. So they're doing the same thing. We're just hearing an interpretation of it. And we're seeing the interpretation of them being able to see with their eyes, the glowing that was in Aquaman. To me, that's just a perfect follow-up. And other than creating why'd you create a bubble? Who knows? Just they were talking to Arthur and ignoring the fact that he can talk to them underwater. Maybe he just doesn't spend much time doing it, so they didn't try that. And then you say he's been there's some time between Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and in the Aquaman movie. So he's out there more in the water doing that. And so maybe he's learned some things since then. They don't need to use a bubble no more. You know, this is a simple thing that you could give an interpretation to. The worst thing about it would be that Mira says that her parents were killed in the wars. So like she's an orphan, and then of
Right.
course she has a father in Aquaman. I think that could possibly be somehow reconciled, but
Stepfather.
hadn't
Yeah.
gone into it too deep.
Yeah.
So,
There's several ways you could there's inconsistencies. I always say this.
Mhm.
I will allow for certain inconsistencies and issues just
you
because
have to
what's
for
going to
Marvel.
be and the thing is, what's going to be perfect though? What's going to be perfect? There's going to be something.
Mhm.
If they could catch everything, movies would never be released because
Oh yeah,
there's always going to be something that's in there that you missed. I mean, heck, we
yeah.
had a Starbucks coffee cup in Game of Thrones. I mean, come on, I don't even want to get into that.
What?
So, yeah.
What?
Now I could say maybe DC movies seem more consistent, to me. But it's always true. I mean, but always when you're telling a different story from somebody else's perspective, it can be different. But yeah, I mean, Marvel has so much that I find retcon. I just buy it, like you said. It's kind of like, I just give in. Who
Yeah,
cares? The inconsistency, it doesn't matter. Who is this? Who is this guy? That Bruce Banner? That's not Bruce Banner.
Yeah,
He's much thinner.
cinematic adaptation of a comic book. I've realized is never going to be 100% down the line accurate to the comic book. The comic book is like the
Oh, yeah.
skeleton.
Oh yeah.
And really,
what you're gonna-
that's an entirely different subject, because the thing, I think Zack Snyder pointed this out too, that said it better than I could, so you could find it in his interview. But he's like, which Superman are you talking about? If we're
Right.
doing an origin story of Superman, there's 4 or 5 origin stories of
Right.
Superman told by different people.
Right.
We're just doing it this way.
Right.
You'd never really. I think his idea too is you don't tell the story of the comics. That's already been told. You already got that. We're going to tell you a different story. Now, Marvel may have to abide a little more toward it because they're doing Infinity War Saga or the Age of Ultron and stuff like that.
Still
so
different.
people expect
Yeah.
it to be
No, it's
really
told different.
close.
It's they're
it's
cl- they're
told
close.
different.
They're close-ish.
Yeah, but I'm saying they may have to try to abide closer.
I see what you're saying.
Because in DC right now, anyway, it's just Man of Steel. The Batman didn't say Batman Year One. If
No.
they'd have done that,
No, yeah.
they'd probably get a lot more criticism from people that
Yeah.
are comics.
You're right. You're right. Because
hard.
it was actually influenced. Here's what's funny. Why can't I remember this dude's name who directed Batman? I'm drawing a blank now. I just drew a
Matthew
blank.
Reeves.
Yes. So one of his college professors actually wrote the story of Batman that he pulled his influence from, and he did not know his college professor was the one that wrote that series of Batman, which was interesting. So it was influenced by Batman Year One, but that wasn't necessarily the overarching, story he pulled from. Yeah.
And that's why, again, it's good he didn't say this is Batman Year One.
Right.
Because then that's where you get those expectations.
Very true.
Even doing Man of Steel, for me, that's how they restarted Superman, was the Man of Steel series in the comics. And for that, like I said, they did well as far as homaging it and not making it exactly the same story. He's telling a different story. And then Batman vs. Superman, whether it's drawn from Flashpoint, which unfortunately I've never read Flashpoint, so I don't know when people reference it what they're talking about.
Watch the cartoon. It's great. I
have watched that, and I may have missed the Batman
versus Superman.
Fight scene.
Yeah, it's in there. I would watch that. That's
I'll look for it again. But of course, I don't have HBO Max anymore. But I'll see what I can find though. But I always, of course, took it as more of an homage to The Dark Knight Returns because they do have the battle in that and the armor in that and stuff like that. And again, I'd sit there and think it's homages. It's really like pointing to this and
not an
pointing
exact
to that.
telling. Yeah,
not exact telling.
Right.
The Lex Luthor, started out with hair, according to people in the John Byrne run. He has hair and balding on top, and he's got hair to begin with, and he's got red hair. So it's all, to me, I give a lot more credence to that Lex Luthor than I hear a lot of people giving. But most people I hear wanting a different Lex Luthor, for some reason, want the Gene Hackman type Lex Luthor, and or Kevin Spacey sort of.
So do you think one of the bigger problems with a lot of these movies is maybe not necessarily the movies themselves, but the expectations? Like if I was a director, how could I meet every fan's expectation? Somebody is going to be mad. So I think to some degree, maybe we need to accept that, okay, he didn't go in a direction I necessarily would have gone. But let's say me as a comic book geek, like I've read the Jane Foster Thor run. Maybe I would have went in a direction that other people who read the run wouldn't have liked. You can't please everyone. That's pretty much my point is how
right.
can you
So
please everyone?
how much time do you have to tell that story is kind of the question. My impression when I was hearing that was like, she's going to take over being Thor. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I think for me, the movie played better because my expectation was like, why do they want to to me, Thor is probably my favorite character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because I can't get the Hulk to become my favorite. So
one thing about that. So Paramount had the rights for 15 years from 2008 to 2023. MCU can do Hulk.
Oh, I did not realize that.
It was Universal, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Or Universal, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So
yeah, they're probably gonna.
Maybe they're trying to set it up. They should have set it up better than they did. I know you said you didn't watch She-Hulk. Good idea. Maybe watch the last
episode 8. Yeah, episode 8 was the best so far.
Episode 8's the most recent.
Is that the one with Daredevil?
The finale.
That's it's the one with Daredevil.
Okay, yeah. That's good.
If you want, I mean, they feel really short. So just to digress for a moment, you could watch them. Expect to only enjoy about 1.5 minutes of each show. The first one's pretty good.
I'm going to tell you where I checked out.
A good setup, I think.
When I saw the clip of She-Hulk twerking with Megan Thee Stallion, I was done. I was like, that's it.
Third or fourth episode.
I was like, I'm not watching it. That's it. I was like, that's all I needed to see. I've already.
You could watch the first one because that's the origin. There's a couple things in there you won't really care about. It's too quick over.
Okay.
And some of it ain't that great, but that's fairly good. And then, like I said, if you watch every show, expect to enjoy 2 to 3 minutes maybe of it. Okay. Try not to watch the end scenes. That's one of the end scenes. You won't see it if you do that. So, especially the one where she's in the show for a half a second. That's the one that you don't want to watch the end scene for. But yeah, 2 or 3 minutes for each show. You'll like this just real quick moment, and you'll get the story with a bit here and
a bit there,
and in episode 8, and then we're waiting for 9 to come out and actually be pretty good. There's still stuff in episode 8 I don't like, but it's the first one that my children got excited to watch the next episode. And overall it was better. Poor CGI and everything else, very bad writing and a lot of stuff. Just
from the clips I saw, that's what I got. And I was like, you know what?
Woke
I don't
agenda.
I
Well,
don't
if you want
think.
to use that word.
No, I mean I don't mind. I can definitely say She-Hulk definitely had the woke agenda for sure. Like
Lots of
the only reason I hesitated to say that when it comes to the Batman comic book is because I didn't really know if it was so much wokeness or just trying to, because sometimes writers try to force things that's not necessarily a matter of wokeness. It's a matter of interest, right? Like if I'm a comic writer and I have an interest, let's say I'm a vegan and I've brought this up before, and I force a vegan story in my book, it's not necessarily woke. It's just my interest that I want to force. So I don't think that was necessarily the case. But with She-Hulk, yeah, I definitely saw. I was like, nah, this is wokeness, like all the way, 100% ultra woke.
You can just call it agendas, whoever's,
Yeah,
the worst of the worst, probably. But and no, I don't think it's actually gotten to the worst of the worst yet, but bad enough. But yeah, just so if you do want to watch She-Hulk, watch the first one, 8th, and wait for the 9th. Hopefully the 9th is going to be really good. And maybe they'll fix all the problems for season 2 if they even do that. Or maybe they're just introducing a way to get Hulk on the big screen with multiple colored Hulks and She-Hulk and something like that. That might be pretty cool.
they have
and get away.
They should adapt the show that I watched as a kid, Hulk and the Agents of Smash.
Wow. Hulk and the
Wow.
Agents of Smash. You know what they
2024.
what they could have done much better was World War Hulk. That was a missed opportunity, in my opinion, with Marvel. Because the way they did Hulk and the Other Planet and Ragnarok and all of that, I was like, man, you really missed an opportunity for World War Hulk. But at that time, Disney didn't own Fox, so they didn't have rights to Professor X, which was part of the Illuminati. It was it Professor X, Reed Richards, Magneto, Iron Man. There was somebody else I'm missing. That was all part of the Illuminati that sent Hulk to that, off world, and that's where the whole World War Hulk came from. And I get it, they couldn't make like we
Black Panther.
Was it Black Panther? Yeah, I knew there was somebody else
think so.
Part of the Illuminati. And I knew they couldn't do an exact adaptation, but when they used that for that story, I was like, oh my goodness, you could have used this somewhere else and it could have been so much better. You could have waited until an Incredible Hulk movie and used this. To use this now is just such a missed opportunity. But that's just me. That's just a geek complaint, really.
Yeah, and that's that binding that Marvel has because it sold all its characters and just this. They're waiting for Hulk to be able. It's greed on their parts, They could do it still. They just have an agreement to give others more money than they're going to make.
Right. So there's a I get it. You're a company. If you're a company and you're not in a business to make money, well then you're why do you have a business? So I get it in that regard. You got to make money, but you don't have to completely abandon like good art in order to make money. You can do it and do this right. Like those two things can exist at the same time, which a lot of these companies tend to think, obviously, that, well, we have to just put this out no matter what it is, just so we can make a lot of money. And it's like, wait, hold on a minute. You could actually do this right and make money at the same time. And my opinion is that they would actually make more money in the long run, because one of the things
they're short-sighted,
right? One of the things Marvel did right, and this is why they made so much money over the years with their movies, is it was a slow rollout. You think that first Iron Man came out in 2008? And then from then, with all of those movies moving forward, releasing slowly but surely and building up, and every movie made more money than the last movie, and the story kept building, and you kept seeing the end credit scenes, and You know, that first end credit scene when I saw Thanos, I was already hyped because I knew exactly. I was like, Infinity War. Immediately, I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe they're going to do this. And it took them years, and I was there for every moment. It didn't have to be quick. And I think the quick money, like you said, to me, in some ways, again, I understand you're a business, you got to make money. But the problem is, if money is your only motivation, you're going to screw this up. You're going to screw it up. It's going to be trash.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that I've had over the years. It's like, yes, money is in there, but let's figure out a way to have a balance between making money and telling a good story.
Some kind of long-term plan. They had a long enough term plan at the time, and it does seem like now they're kind of letting things go. If they're able to get the rights back where next year they could release a Hulk movie, they should have been building up, Hulk. They've been tearing down Hulk rather than building him up. Yeah. Now we're off in the Marvel universe.
Yeah,
but it does focus on the things with DC because, like I said, that's really where the issues come in, and I think they're overblown more than anything else because it's the remembrance of Justice League is there.
I agree with Carson. It is. I don't even remember the cinematic release. The director's cut is all I recognize. Cinematic release doesn't exist to me.
Well, and what I mean by the remembrance of it is that we see all that. If you can see all the behind the scenes, you see the people wanting what they wanted. That's what you got was a makeshift Marvel movie trying to do what Marvel did with DC characters and rewriting the history of it too. It's like that, that's they want this blue and red Superman, suit, where Zack Snyder's pushing for the black suit. Yeah, same one.
I like it. And
they could have had both in the thing, and they could have headed in that direction. There's a whole lot of speculation because we're really not very far, in the DC universe. So, like what I'm saying is like overblown is people do remember that Justice League came out and was a flop, and let me say, as far as overblown too, to be clear about what overblown means, if you look up Superman Returns, they say it cost this much money. All this budget was in Superman Returns. I'm like, where is all that money they said they put into Superman Returns? It wasn't that. They put it into the Superman with Nicolas Cage and another Justice League movie and stuff like that. They put in all this production value into it. And they say, okay, what we came up with after all those movies being developed was the Superman Returns. And you didn't make the money back. It's like, that really wasn't that movie's fault. And so that does go to the same thing with Justice League, where they put a bunch of money into Justice League for Zack Snyder's Justice League. And then they destroyed it, reshot so much stuff.
Which I don't understand. Like, that much I did look into.
Every bit of it was like worse.
I don't know why you did this. What was the... Like,
I'll give you a great example. There's a scene where Cyborg is in the window. And the camera, is kind of pulling in on him a little bit.
Right.
And it's a broken window, and it's this beautiful, brick building. That's all. They reshot that shot to put him in a hoodie to cover up the CGI that was already done because it was in the commercials. It was done, and they reshot it anyway. And then nothing else is different in that shot,
right?
Except it's a different scenery. They cover him in a hoodie, and and the broken glass looks a little different. It's just a different setup to it. It's the weirdest thing, and it surely cost them a bunch of money. So they cost money for all those reshoots to be done, and it was pointless. It would have been a lot better just having the shots that they reshot back in there, and just that simple thing. And that's what, when I watched it, I was like, huh. Okay, but I remember the shot the way it was, and it's just visually it's a better shot.
Yeah,
and then you get into the other shots that are actually visually a better shot and had a better scene to it that were in the there.
So what was even the point? What was
Trailers.
I don't understand that. What was even the point of changing these things? I cannot
that's a
wrap my
mystery.
brain around that. And even when I watched the director's cut and you watch some of the behind the scenes stuff on HBO Max, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, so the rumors are true. You had what they say, 85% of the movie when Snyder's daughter, passed away, unfortunately, was already done.
Completely
so
done.
I'm like, all you had to do was like 15%. The story's already told. You don't have
Mostly
anything to do.
special effects.
Well,
yeah.
I was just like, you guys really are terrible. Like whoever is in charge at DC, in my opinion,
was in charge.
That's right.
Yep.
Right. Because they're under new management. Whoever was in charge at that moment, somebody should have stepped in and said, look, I don't understand why you're doing this, but this doesn't make sense. You already have 85% of this movie done. Do not change that. Just add whatever you need to add. And in my opinion, they should have just let Zack Snyder grieve. Because why do these people have a problem with just being honest? Why couldn't they just come out and say, hey, our director has had a family issue. We want to give him time to grieve, and we want to honor the work that he's put into this. So this is going to be delayed. I think the fans would have understood personally.
Yeah. Again, that goes back to that money and that idea that there's a competition. I have a sneaking suspicion that the reason they couldn't use that footage, had to reshoot it, was possibly because in contract Zack Snyder, it's like, these are my shots. And I think
okay, we are back in business. We had some technical difficulties. Now we're back. I can't remember where we left off at. What you were saying. I don't know if we were talking about Shazam. We were kind of having that conversation offline.
Yeah, we had some Shazam offline. What were we talking about, Carson, when it dropped? You had run off to take a break.
You were stuck like that.
Yeah, I don't remember where we were. Let's do this, because I'm gonna go. Let's say I'll go for another 10 minutes, and we'll come back and revisit all of these things we talked about, or go into some of the other things on the next episode I have you guys on. But if you had to, let's say, I don't want to really give you a time frame, but let's say for this podcast, this episode, we're gonna come back, so there'll be more we talk about. What would you say to sum up some of DC's shortfalls and how they can go about fixing these shortfalls?
Okay. So, like I said before, and probably where I was in the middle of was, and I'll call it just the old regime at Warner Brothers, the people that were in charge of the film departments, and during Man of Steel time, when they were allowing things to happen because they loved, Chris Nolan. He was kind of helped that along. But then they decided that there was the battle and all that. So I'll skip a lot of that. But that crowd, as long as they were intermingling, it was messing different things up. When they decided, hey, we're going to let this guy do something. James Wan, for instance, go do your thing. we're not going to interfere with this. You can kind of say it may kind of follow the fall of the theatrical Justice League, but at least they let him do. And then they went out the same thing. They let Shazam do what Shazam did. I think that their shortcomings in that were releasing it at the wrong time. That is a Christmas movie, and they did not release it at the right time.
That's a good point.
Set for Christmas.
That is a very
they
good
had
point.
Had it in Christmas. They started out with a song for Christmas. I mean, they would have got the word of mouth at the right time. It's Christmas time. Go see this movie. This is the Christmas family kids movie. This is awesome. No, that's most of where they fell short there. They did a little bit of falling short on special effects. Because when I look back, Man of Steel is flawless special effects wise. Batman v Superman has flawless special effects too. Especially when you look into everything that was special effects, like Michael Shannon did not wear that armor. He wore a suit, and that armor is all CGI. Go watch it again with it all CGI. It is not floating head CGI like some other movies come out with. It is flawless. Did you say who?
Yeah. Oh, Zod.
Okay. Yeah, Zod. Michael Shannon, Zod. So yeah, I mean, they kept putting their nose into things. I think that's a lot of where 1984 went wrong. They're trying to say, well, we don't want to connect it as much to Zack Snyder and that. I'm trying to remember when it came out. In comparison.
2020, December 2020.
2020. So it's coming out before Zack Snyder's Justice League came out, and right before, and it was delayed many times.
Yeah.
So you can tell there's a lot of interference whenever there's a lot of delays, and it's money. It's that kind of thing. It is a known fact that they released the edited theatrical cut of Justice League and cut it down and all that to try to get more people in the seats. And to make their bonuses. The bonuses is the big thing. They say, we got to release it by this date to get our bonuses, which is just like a lot of CCOs and CFOs that make big money. They didn't really do anything in the company went under the next year, that same year even.
Right.
But they make some kind of big bonus. It's that corruption that exists that who knows why. And I think that's what I heard anyway. Last I heard, Walter Hamada's one of those guys, and he was going to stick around waiting for Black Adam to be released and stuff. I don't know. He might have left early since then because they had a couple news items. Batgirl was canceled and all that.
That was entirely complete, and they just cut it.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, I think I think I discussed that on one of my episodes.
Yeah, and we might have to take another episode to kind of get into what that might be.
Okay.
But I probably agree with you a lot on that as far as what they were probably doing because it was supposed to go to HBO Max. So it was probably more like the CW stuff, which CW is, of course, far more left-leaning agendas seeking stuff.
For sure.
So, when you introduce that into movies, those movies don't do well. You can see that Top Gun just came out. Oh my goodness,
did very well.
Yeah,
and it's what it is?
Like number 11 worldwide, and it was still in the theaters.
I will say this, I don't think this is because left-leaning ideas won't or can't sell. I think it's because left-leaning ideas are forced and shoved down people's throats. I don't have a problem with seeing a left-leaning idea in a movie. I'm not gonna die. It's not gonna be a terrible movie just because it's a left-leaning idea. But when it is forced, and when I can tell it is forced, like this is a scene out of place, this is a character out of place, this is dialogue out of place, You force this. That's when I check out. Like, just tell
Right.
me a good story. And if in that good story there happens to be something I don't particularly agree with, so be it. I can take that. You know, that doesn't bother me. It's forcing it is where I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm checked out at this point.
Right. Well, forcing it, or I would think, I haven't found it yet. If you centralize a movie on that, then it's not. It really shouldn't be either way. I mean, some things to me are neutral. Right leaning is now just what it's made,
Right.
made out to be,
Agreed.
rather than, you can say Top Gun is right leaning, but
It's not
it's
really.
not like, it's not like out and out right leaning. You're not
Right.
naming any particular country that we would necessarily recognize like that.
Right.
It's very generic, but it's
Russia.
it's the way
The
things
Huskies.
really are. Yeah, right. Yeah, whatever. But so yeah, they do have that problem. All movies have this problem where there's things being forced on it the other way. And if you just let people interpret stuff and make it more generic, then it does better.
Right. So would your summation be that DC focus on art, the art of storytelling, less on money making, give us something good, and a byproduct of that will be you get a lot of money.
Right, and I think that's how they were starting. I think that's why the Dark Knight series did well. The three, Chris
Very
Nolan
well.
trilogy.
Yep.
The problem with the third movie really stems from the fact that Heath Ledger unfortunately passed away.
Man, that was
it
Goodness.
stems from that, and he had to
Yeah.
change things and make something else
Right.
that didn't work as well. Even though I know a lot of people like it, and I don't dislike it. There's certain parts of it that are like, well,
You recognize that it's not what we were supposed to get,
not
but
what it should have
unfortunate,
been.
right?
Yeah.
Unfortunate situations happen.
Maybe they didn't have enough time to rework it and figure something out
Right.
completely.
Definitely.
And then again, it may be that Chris Nolan didn't have the right idea for Batman at the end.
Possible.
I don't know. It's because I don't. That's another story. It's Chris Nolan
Right.
episode.
So
but yeah, to boil it down, even I think they both even did. Marvel, it's the same thing. They're
sure.
telling the right stories and telling them in the right way. They've kind of veered off of that.
they have.
And that may be Disney getting too involved now. And not letting things take a natural course. And it could be something else. It could be that the comics are more like that.
I can tell you that comics have lost some steam in the storytelling department because there is as much as I know a lot of people don't like hearing this, and a lot of people think that some of us who mention this are just on a warpath, but it is the truth that there are agendas being pushed, and that does not make for a good story.
That's
because
right.
you're forcing things. And I always say, if you have a screenwriter, a comic book writer who has a certain thing about their lives that is the overarching thing in their lives, that's going to work its way out in their stories organically because it's part of their lives. Get it? Got it. Understand that. When it is forced, when it is like, yo, man, like every page, like the whole idea, the son of Kal-El, I don't know. Don't even get me started. Anyway, let me stop myself there before I go off the deep end. But anyway, so now Carson.
You're right. No, you're right. See, before we get to Carson real quick.
Okay.
That's kind of where I think Wonder Woman 1984 went in the direction. I watch it the best I can and try to get the right idea behind it, and then I enjoy the way it all kind of does. Like you said, it seems kind of not fleshed out enough. It's not like it didn't take enough time. Maybe tried to put too much in there. There's a variety of things that probably don't work well unless you think about it and try to add stuff in your mind from what they tell you to say, okay, well, there's more to this than that, you know.
Right.
And that, and then the Harley Quinn, movie with Birds of Prey.
Still haven't watched it.
It's
Skippable.
not bad really. It's just like it's fun to kind of watch like action and wise and stuff. But I think they took their cue. They said, well, we've got to make this movie more like Deadpool or something like that.
Probably.
Where we're gonna make it hard R. We're gonna cuss every few seconds and
Right.
stuff like that. It's like if you cut out all the cussing from it,
Right.
it immediately increases the mood. It's an R-rated movie that could have been PG-13 easily, and then parents looking at the R-rated versus PG-13 rating on it would say, okay, my children can go to the PG-13. They shouldn't have had children going to it. You know, that's the thing.
Right.
But if you change it to PG-13, then you got all these children that are going to flood the movies and they're going to enjoy, the action of it and stuff like that. It doesn't really push hard, on the agendas. It doesn't do that forcing thing except in a couple places maybe.
Right.
Where you say it's out of place, but you could really care about the rest. I think that it was a story that they wanted to put too much stuff into that I think most people are just like, I don't care about that. That doesn't need to be done. I don't remember in my going to Top Gun Maverick there being a bunch of foul language. A couple times maybe.
There really wasn't.
Every word.
There
it's
really
not
wasn't.
Like
yeah.
Yeah. It's not like, I mean, that kind of thing just throws me off. A lot of movies I've never watched because whatever you say.
Okay, so
we should do the next one, Marvel.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
We could do a Marvel one, yeah.
How bad Phase 4 is.
Yeah. So we're back. Had some technical difficulties. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask Carson the same question I asked Don. What do you think? Sum it up in about maybe 10. Back in the building. 10 or maybe 20 minutes. Or let's say 10. Let's keep it to 10. What do you think is something DC could do to course correct and maybe make better movies moving forward? What do you think they need to do?
What do I think? Or
no, what do I think?
I was asking
Carson. Okay,
Carson.
there we go.
Yeah.
I guess just make a plan and tell people where they're going with it. That's my biggest issue with DC right now is I have no idea where they're going. And so I'm not as invested with DC as I have been with Marvel. Because in the past with Marvel, I always know where they're going. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know exactly the way they're going to do it. But I know where they're going. And so it gives me a sense that, okay, this is actually getting somewhere. I want to watch all of these so then I know that it will be worth it to watch all of these. That's why a lot of people skip a lot of the TV shows for Phase 4 Marvel. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, it needs a sense of direction for me.
Okay.
And they need to let the people that work on the films and make the films, not mess it up.
So the talking heads in the suits need to take a back seat, do their back seat thing, and let the people who are professionals at making movies make movies.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so to add to that, well, number one, bring back Zack Snyder. That's the first step.
Facts. We can all agree on that.
Probably make him whatever. But I know he's busy. He's doing whatever else, and he's going to do great in what he's doing anyway. So, but that would be a good thing to do. But the main things to do, I think they're maybe doing it. Even though a new company looks like, of course, they're looking at money and they're saying, they're having a focus on money. But from the cancellation of Batgirl and the pushing back of these other movies, some reshoots that are happening, and the rumors here that you hear, which we'll probably have to follow up on,
No doubt.
they may be heading in the right direction. Trying to build that, like you said, get that plan. Listen to the actual fans.
Yeah, you can
that's
say
the
that
thing.
one more
Listen
time.
to real fans.
Yeah. Not the people screaming on Twitter.
Right. Don't look at trending topics. Forget that nonsense. It's all manipulated.
Right.
That's just stay away from it. Stay with the people that you actually hear. And really see it. Not that things can't trend. Snyder released a Snyderverse or released a Snyder Cut, trended and trended and trended over and over and over again.
Trending topics are not necessarily bad.
Right.
Right.
But that shouldn't be the media trends, I guess is the best way to say it. The mainstream media, whatever they say is what's really going on, is again not really.
Right.
Gotta get out among the real people in the world and see what's really happening. But unfortunately, most of entertainment is a mess. It really always has been a mess, to tell the truth. But that, with what he said, make your plan, tell your plan,
stick with it.
As far as what it is, I think that the idea is to do more character related stuff than to tell a big story to go to,
which works.
But you have it available. It doesn't have to do anything except say Zack Snyder's back. He's going to develop at least Justice League 2 and 3, some parts of Man of Steel or Superman sequels.
Right.
Ben Affleck is back. He's going to do whatever he's going to do for Batman to flesh out that character, because he was going to do it, and the heads wanted what they want. He said, "I'm not going to fight y'all."
Right.
And he said, "I'm done. I'm leaving.
Not doing this. You're going to get in my way."
Right. He saw all the treatment, but now he's back. Rumor is.
That's the rumor. So, I think it's a pretty strong rumor.
Right. So they need to learn from those mistakes, and I think that's the thing. What they do try to force, what they see Marvel do that's successful, fine. Just say, "Good on you." Our people are doing whatever they're going to do, not introduce Deadpool type stuff to Harley Quinn.
Would you be more Marvel, please?
Forget that. Don't do it.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Because if they really took that approach, then they ought to put a fighter jet movie out, and just put superheroes into it.
Right. Superheroes and jets.
What in the world?
Yeah.
We're going to copy Top Gun. No, stop copying. Do what is... Because you got, like I think I've heard you already say, this is a wealth of material to draw from.
Yes.
And my main thing would be don't identify everything and say, this is exactly what... We're doing the New 52. Or we're going to do this Crisis series, to do this. Only try to homage it,
just do it.
It's not like Justice League, the introduction of Steppenwolf,
right?
However he was introduced in the comics, and try to follow that run to the letter.
When Marvel showed
homage, because you can put a lot more homage, like 10 different runs in there. Like I've heard that Hush is somehow homage. I haven't gone through it.
I have to read Hush again.
The Snyderverse. Yeah, so I mean but I hear that, and of course I'll see a picture brought up, and it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's very similar. It's like that's the homage, and a lot of it's going to be, for me anyway. It's at least as long as Zack Snyder's much involved, it's going to be that visual storytelling, because he does visual storytelling like nobody else that I could compare him to right now. Just
Yeah, he's good at
amazing
it.
visual.
He's good at it.
As far as in there giving background or giving, it does that just fine. I'm just saying that those heavy dialogue type of storytelling is not going to be his type of movie.
Right.
And wherever that fits into a movie, it should be told that way. Probably a Batman story is going to be needing more dialogue, and it's going to be needed to be told right. So it's going to need that writer for it, and somehow mix in awesome visuals as well, because
You can do
that's
that.
really what started that out. And I
Right.
think that's where the best of their movies have stayed. Aquaman, Shazam. Oh, the first Wonder Woman. It looks like Black Adam. Just beautiful visuals.
Right.
So
Keep the jokes to a
keep that.
minimum. You're DC. You're not Marvel.
Or at least keep them the right way. Like Shazam is full of jokes.
But the thing is,
Perfect.
Shazam is
What
the
it is.
perfect movie for that. It is the perfect movie for that. It fits. The young kid becomes a superhero. I get it. I understand it. So I'll end with that. Carson, you were gonna say something before I end.
Yeah. In ROTC, I'm in the PA team, and so with our newsletters, our previous one, we were like on a real bumpy road. Previously, we had it done like a week ahead of time, and it not only was it that the issue with the recent one was because we were getting off track more than we needed to, but also we didn't have a plan that we stuck to. Not only did we have events that got delayed because of the hurricane, but we didn't have a plan that we stuck to because we had things that we were going to talk about, and then those got taken out. And so, but previously we had a plan. We stuck with that from the beginning of the month to the end of the month, and it got done, and it was good.
That plan worked.
But with the recent one, we had to do it last few days. So for something to work, you need a plan, and that's my analogy for
just one thing to add to that.
Why they need.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing to add to that is I think you can tell the cohesive team story and still do these other verse things like the Batman. Joker is different and separate from the Batman. So you're going to have a different Joker in the Batman,
Right.
So they're definitely different universes, just like Marvel. Like I would
Treat
say,
it like
still
a
has
comic
different
book.
music.
Comic books have different runs.
Exactly.
Some runs
and if
don't
you ever
follow.
want to do something where you cross them over,
Right.
that would please fans, in some way that you could do that cohesively within that storyline still. But yeah, and I think both companies do need to get back on that same track too, because what y'all have already said about Marvel.
Right.
The next podcast needs to be Marvel. Why Phase 4 is
my
so
goodness.
bad.
I can go on for days. Anyway, I'm gonna end it there. Thank you guys for joining me. I definitely greatly appreciate it. And folks, there you have it. The Thinking Podcast, talking through all things DC, where they went wrong. Of course, Don and Carson have more knowledge than I do in this area. I am a Marvel guy. Not that I don't follow DC, because Batman is my favorite hero of all time. I say hero because he's not super powered, although the fan theory is that Bruce Wayne has superhuman intelligence, which I can definitely believe that. Again, thank you for joining me on this podcast. I greatly appreciate it, and we will see you next time.